Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Forum on Safety. My name is Pete Lattanzio and I'm the Chief of the Town of Colonie Department of Fire Services. And with me today is Mike Rayball. He is from the Town of Colonie Emergency Management Officer. He is an emergency planner. And Mike, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Pete.
Mike, we hear the term emergency management, and what is your office all about?
Well, you know, Pete, for the most part, emergencies in the Town of Colonie are handled pretty routinely by our emergency service group, Pete, or police, fire, and EMS. Emergency management deals with an emergency from a different aspect. We kind of look at it in a life cycle, before, during, and after. We look at emergencies from the point of view of what can we do to prevent it from happening? What can we do to minimize the effects of it if it does happen? Secondly, we do get involved in the response in that we help coordinate the resources for the commanders. We're involved in recovery after the emergency is over, okay? And then the biggest part of our job is planning, is getting ready for those emergencies when they occur.
Okay. You know, you just brought up a lot of different things. I know, working with you over the years, that we've been involved in a lot of pre-planning of things and hopefully preventing incidents from happening. You know, we've worked along the Mohawk River and a variety of other things. Are there any other major projects that you've been working on, looking at that preventative portion of it, trying to prevent something from happening?
Well, if you remember last April, we had a series of storms come through the area that caused some significant flooding. And one of the things that we were able to do through the FEMA group was do a certain amount of mitigation, looking at some of the areas where this flooding occurred and work with the DPW departments to be able to create changes in the infrastructure to prevent those floods from occurring again, or when they do occur, to minimize the effects upon the people that were affected by them.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but very often, isn't there federal monies or state monies that are available that could come into the community once a situation like that's been identified to help those situations be corrected so that it would prevent further issues?
Yeah, there are. There's a lot of ways we can do it. There's a couple of ways through a declaration of emergency where monies are made available, but there's also grants made available to communities to be able to look at their infrastructure, to look at their community, to identify those hazards, and to mitigate them before they occur through mitigation type grants, correct?
You know, you talked about flooding, and you know, I think people are very familiar with what happened to Katrina. And how do emergencies that would get elevated to your level? And you kind of mentioned that we handle routine stuff every day between the police departments in the police department in the town, the fire departments and EMS. So they handle the routine stuff. What other emergencies could come along that would kick it up to a level that, say, your office would get involved with? What other type of events?
Well, you know, recently we had, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, we had the tornado that went through Mechanicville around Memorial Day. I was there and frankly felt I was in Kansas. It was that kind of damage. A few years before that, we had the ice storm of the North Country. We called that the 3-degree storm because there was only 3 degrees difference between here and there. And the damage that was created up in there caused infrastructure damage that resulted in power outages for months where people were without power to their facilities. Those are the kinds of things that are out there. We don't often see them here. You know, we've kidded several times within our discussions about living under a golden halo here. But, you know, unfortunately, they do happen to communities, and it's our job to make sure that when they do happen, and our resources are taxed to the point where they're handling the routine calls as well as the emergency calls, that we have the resources available to be able to help them out. That's what we do.
You mentioned, you know, again, these are natural disasters, but unfortunately, the world that we live in today, there could also be man-made disasters, such as what we saw down in New York City and some of the other events that have happened, luckily not too often in this country, but what we've seen worldwide. And again, this is something that your office would also step into place, correct?
Exactly. You know, terrorism is something that we've learned to live with over the last several years. But beyond terrorism, we have rail lines that run through the town of Colonie, on both sides of towns. We have a major airport, and we have the river, all of which carry hazardous materials daily. Any one of them could cause a problem for us. It's our job, that once we've recognized those hazards, to be able to put plans in place with the other agencies that if something should happen, we're prepared.
Well, I know from being out on the street and working with you, we've had, again, some minor incidents that could have been a lot worse. We've had a couple of tanker turnovers along the interstates. Again, luckily we haven't had any train derailments or any major issues on the river, but we've had some incidents that really could have escalated into the town. And luckily, the incident itself has stayed minor, and the people that were there were prepared and they were trained to handle that emergency, and they've kept it to a minimum.
We have been lucky. Consequently, you know, for the most part, we have good people in the right places. You know, it's not so much the people, however, it is the situation that occurs, and the kinds of the time of day, the things that we're involved with, you know, all the other intangibles that we don't really have a good handle on. We can't really plan for them that can affect the outcome of these things.
I know from some of the other programs that we've put on, and you kind of mentioned it today, it's a kind of a group effort that everybody has to work together. I know there's a National Incident Command System that's been instituted by the federal government. It's really been kicked up since Katrina. So I know your office has been very much involved with that also, not only ensuring that the emergency responders get it, but also to look at the town government to make sure that the town government's prepared.
You know, one of the problems that came out of Katrina was that we found that we all did the same thing, but in many places we did it using different terminology, different terms, and did it in different ways. What the National Incident Management System has tried to do is put together a system of doing it the same way all over. So then in the event you had that catastrophic event like Katrina, where help came from all over the country, when people came in there, they were able to form that cohesive unit and work together without having to learn new terminology and new ways of doing it. And everybody talked the same language. When they talked about a piece of equipment, they all knew what they were talking about because it was referred to in the same way in Louisiana as it was here. So basically that's what NIMS is about. It's trying to get people to be able to come together in a cohesive unit, not only within their own communities, okay, but as we get to the point where we have to reach out and help our neighbors.
And again, I think a real important player, and everybody would think that automatically that police, fire, and EMS are going to be involved, but obviously emergency management, but also the town authorities, even up to the supervisor's office, and those types of folks from the governmental branch are also going to be involved in these types of incidents.
Yeah, exactly. You know, again, we think of emergencies, we think of the traditional police, fire, and EMS. But how many times have we been involved in situations where we've used our DPW staffs to help us,
Right.
Either with heavy equipment, in securing roads, in securing different areas. But one of the primary roles of local government is the safety of their constituency. Okay, and if they don't understand what we're trying to do, if they don't understand what we're talking about at the time, it's going to create confusion for us. So basically what this program has done is bring us all under one umbrella that helps us to get together and form that cohesive unit.
You mentioned the ice storm, the 3-degree storm that they had up north. And, you know, I remember that storm very vividly, and I know the devastation that occurred up there. And like you mentioned, some folks were without power for months on end. And that wasn't just one little community that was hit. That was a very large portion of upstate New York that was affected. So all those communities are going to be vying for resources. So it's very important that everybody work together. I know from the town of Colonie that equipment and manpower was sent from this area to assist up there.
That's right.
And that's something that your office would also help coordinate?
Again, the key thing for emergency management is, I was reading something just the other day, okay, and it describes the emergency manager as a stage manager or a coordinator, okay. Our job is not really the hands-on. You guys do that. You've done it well for years without emergency management. It's when we get into those large-scale incidences where we've run out of the resources that we control ourselves and control well on a routine basis. It's when we start to bring in the other resources that somebody needs to coordinate it, okay. Your hands are full in managing the incident. Okay, it's the consequences of that incident that we get involved in. Managing the resources to be able to have them there when you need them, have the right resources for you when you ask for them, and to be able to get them for you and rotate them through as you need them, so that you're not waiting for something that you need critically at a time.
How far up the food chain can you pull resources from? Obviously, we know what we've got in town. Where would you reach out to next? The county, the state, the federal level?
The programs are designed to work just that way, okay? Once we've exhausted our own resources within the town, and we're very lucky here, we have a tremendous amount of resources, but we also have very good relationships with our surrounding communities. And we would work through the county and then to the state level with our requests for additional assistance. Mutual aid plans are in place through the fire service, through the EMS service. We're beginning to develop those kinds of relationships with our police and DPW departments so that we'll be able to reach out on a timely basis and have what we need.
I know from, and again, you mentioned this before, we had some flooding situation occur here last year. Your office is also very instrumental in recovering monies that are generated from the municipality, from the fire departments, other response agencies through the federal government when a declaration is declared.
Again, a lot of that's dependent upon, the severity of the damage and whether or not a declaration is issued by the upper governments, by the state or by the federal government. Once those declarations are made and agreed upon, then we can go and recover a lot of the funds. The government is good enough to be able to reimburse us for overtime costs for all of our staffs, so that as we get into long-term situations, for example, the snowstorms of a couple of years ago around the holidays, the town was able to recover roughly $300,000 or $400,000 in overtime costs for those storms, which frankly is a large part of their annual budget. So that recovery was instrumental for them.
So that's definitely a benefit to the municipality. Again, where you have X amount of dollars budgeted for the year, but we live in the Northeast. We don't know if we're going to have a heavy snow winter or a light snow winter, and in this case, I know we got nailed pretty good.
Twice.
And this really helped the town to recover a lot of those costs that were expended. Therefore, the departments were able to continue plowing snow all winter long, where maybe we wouldn't have been so fortunate had that not kicked in. So
again, it was a big help, and we would have got the streets plowed. Obviously, DPW does a great job with that. The streets would have been plowed, but where would the money have come from to perhaps some of the other programs later on in the year? So it was a big assistance. By no means did we do that by ourselves either, okay? That was a combination of efforts between ourselves and the DPW departments to be able to put that information together, again, through the planning process that said, look, we know you're going to have a storm. Keep track of these costs because there's a possibility we'll be able to recover it. And that's one of the things that we do now. As soon as we get notification or we start seeing forecasts and start hearing that there's a potential for this stuff, we send the information out right away. Start keeping track of these costs so that when the time comes, if that declaration is made, they're not scrambling to recover them. It's all right there for them.
I guess through the years I've been fortunate. I've taken some training courses along with you, and I guess I was a little surprised to see what was involved in looking down the road. I mean, we look at, you just mentioned, we got a potential for a very large nor'easter coming in, and there's going to be a lot of snow. Okay, that's going to happen today or tomorrow. But how are we going to handle this storm if another storm comes right in behind it? What kind of resources are going to be needed? We're going to have enough snowplow drivers because of them having to work extended hours, fuel, food, downtime. There's a whole variety of things that come in, and that's really a lot of what your office does, correct?
Again, not handling that, not hands-on. Okay, more coordinating, more looking ahead, more planning, more having resources available when they're needed, understanding and asking the questions, what if? What if we do get a second storm this week and we've completely worn out our staffs? Where are we going to go? In a situation like that, it's a little difficult because we're in an area where we have, everybody's going to be in the same boat. We may need to reach out outside of the area. But those are the kinds of questions that you have to ask. And a lot of people aren't thinking along those lines. They're thinking immediacy. They're thinking about, okay, right now my concern is get the roads ready, okay, or take care of the fire as it exists right now. Our job is to look at the bigger picture, okay, and take that burden off the commanders and let them make the decisions for what they're dealing with at the time. We're looking and planning for the operational period to come.
And I think that's really been brought to light by incidents such as the World Trade Center and Katrina and the wildfires that have gone on in California, where you see these events go on for days and sometimes weeks, and in the case of the North Country, up to a month or so. There's a lot of logistical planning and a lot of resources that have to be brought to the table. that I think a lot of people wouldn't even begin to imagine have to be there.
Yeah. When you think about bringing in, the power companies have done it for years, where they've gone in to help these areas that have been stricken by the ice storms and by heavy damaged windstorms. Okay, these people come in and they work for 4 or 5 days. There have to be plans in place. Where do they put these people up? The power companies have done that for their own staffs. But when you get into not only power companies but tree removal companies, additional fire service personnel to be able to spell those people that are working and have been working diligently to take care of the things, they need a rest as well. EMS staff, law enforcement. Somebody's got to be planning as to what they're going to do with those people when they bring them into an area. All part of what emergency management people are charged with taking care of.
Again, I guess I've been amazed over the years to see how much is there. And, again, I'm so used to being in that first responders position where you're not looking long term, you're not looking down the road and, hey, where am I going to get those resources from? Folks at home, what could you tell them to have on hand, or how to be prepared for something? And again, you mentioned that we had the tornadoes that happened here, 10 miles up the road from us. We had the ice storm that, it was a sizable distance away, but it was only 3 degrees difference. It could have very easily happened here. So what can folks do at home to be prepared that's realistic and stuff that they can keep on hand?
Yeah, one of the things, Pete, we've learned over the years is that when these things do happen, our resources are taxed immediately, taking care of those immediate needs, the people who really need help. What we've been trying to do, and what the national movement is to get people to plan to take care of themselves for at least 72 hours. To be able to look at themselves and say, okay, unless I'm injured or I really have a major crisis, what can I do to help in the overall recovery from this situation? And the first thing is to be able to take care of themselves for that period of time. If the power goes out, do I have batteries? Do I have flashlights? Can I take care of myself with the very most basic needs? If I have no power, how am I going to get information? Do I have a battery-operated radio? Can I keep time in my house with a battery-operated clock? Battery-operated radios such as this, okay? Again, in today's times, we don't even think of these things anymore. I remember when we had the power outages several years back, my kids kept saying, well, I'm going to go upstairs and watch television. To them, it made no difference. The power was out. Well, okay, I'll just go upstairs. That TV's not working. We don't think along those lines. We need to be able to take care of ourselves with basic needs. First aid kits. We should all have a basic first aid kit in our house. We should all have the ability to be able to feed ourselves without the gas stove or without the electric stove. Basic foods such as canned goods. Water is another basic element that we need. We should have at least 1 gallon or 3 gallons of water for every person in the house for each day. So it's necessary to be able to take care of yourself for that period of time for at least 72 hours so that the emergency services people can take care of the crises before they have to start taking care of the everyday recovery. Help will eventually come, but the better you are prepared to take care of yourself, the easier you're going to make it for the first responders to take care of the real emergencies.
I think people need to realize, too, that this is stuff they need to have on hand because you don't know when something's going to happen. It kind of cracks me up every time they predict a major snowstorm. You want to stay out of the major markets because it's like a free-for-all. You can't find a loaf of bread. You can't find any milk. We're pretty fortunate here. We live in the Northeast. We're usually used to snowstorms. So we're not trapped in our house for days, but yet there's that mentality that I've got to have all this stuff. Yet, a tornado could hit tomorrow, an earthquake could hit tomorrow. There could be a natural disaster or a man-made disaster that you're not going to have that opportunity to get to the store. Exactly.
If that storm were to come through, one of the things that we're looking at today is this so-called pandemic flu situation that you're looking at. One of the things they're concerned about with that type of a situation is that so many people will be sick that our transportation system may go down. The supplies may not be there to take care of people. So, we're telling people to be able to stock up and take care of yourself for a certain period of time. It's really important. It's a basic situation. It's a basic plan. We all have pantries in our house, okay? Just throw a few extra things in there so that if you did need to be without for a while, you had something to rely on. Okay? You could take care of your family for those first few hours, those first few days. A basic plan of evacuation from your home is another thing. You guys in the fire service have done it for years, you know. Find a place to meet. Suppose something happened in the neighborhood, okay? Would your family know where to go? Would they know where to meet the rest of the family? Would they know how to contact the rest of the family? I suggest to people that they have an out of the neighborhood, out of the town contact that they can call and say, I'm okay. And then everybody in the family can reach that person and say, I'm okay, so that if they're separated, they know. One of the things that we learned from Katrina was people were for days wondering where the rest of the families were. They had been separated. They didn't know whether they were dead or alive. So if you have that out-of-area contact that you can call and say, I'm okay, and everybody gets to them, then at least everybody, that peace of mind is there. You have a central meeting location outside the home for the house. Have some kind of a location where you can get together, where you know that you can go after something happens. All of those things are part of the planning. Know when you go out into facilities such as the malls, make sure you know where your exits are. Make sure you know how to get out of those facilities in the event something should happen. Where you work, know what their emergency plans are. You know, nothing's worse than going into a new building, okay, and not being able to find your way out. In normal conditions, if just say the lights went out, but suppose there was a real catastrophe, okay? Look around. Make yourself aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we see on the fire side of things. We work with a lot of businesses developing emergency plans and escape plans and evacuation procedures, but a lot of the employees don't take it seriously. And I know for a fact that saved a lot of people's lives in the World Trade Center, because after the first bombing, they took that very seriously, and they were very aggressive with developing evacuation plans, and they practiced it with the people. So when this event did happen on September 11th, those folks, granted it was a terrible situation, but kind of knew how to react, and I believe they attribute that to saving a lot of folks' lives down there.
It's unfortunate that a lot of times people don't take seriously enough those practice situations, those drill situations. You know, it's very simple to walk out of a building when you know it's just a drill. But you know, if the building were filled with smoke, or if the building had been destroyed in some sort of a catastrophe, it might not be that easy. Okay, if you don't familiarize yourself with your surroundings, you know, it could be a completely different story.
You brought up an interesting point about having a contact person outside the area and/or a meeting place that folks can meet. I know, again, my wife was in New York City when the September 11th happened, and her first thing was to try and call me. Her cell phone didn't work because the major antenna sites were the World Trade Center, and that system went down very quickly, and she couldn't use her cell phone.
You know, a lot of times, too, we tell people that make that contact out of the area completely, because the local phone circuits may be completely tied up with emergency situations. It may be easier to get an outside circuit or a long-distance circuit. So make that outside of an area so that you can be sure that you'll be able to make a contact. Remember, too, that cell phones aren't always going to work, like you said, okay? If the towers are damaged like they were in the ice storms, cell phones are going to be a major problem. Yeah. So have some sort of system put in place beforehand. It's a lot easier to have it beforehand and practice with it than it is to try and figure out when you're under the stress of the real thing.
Again, I know people become very complacent, and they sit in their warm homes, and they're eating their dinner, and they're watching TV, and they said, geez, that happened at that place, and that's too bad for those folks. But they don't think about it because they don't think it could happen to them. We do have the potential here for a variety of things that could happen, and I think folks need to understand that the information that you're giving out to them is very valid, and they could unfortunately have to tap into this someday.
You know, we're no different here than any place else in the country. Okay, we have exactly the same kinds of hazards, exactly the same kinds of situations. The Northeast is got 4 seasons. We have our extremes in the winter, our extremes in the summer. We're prone to all of the emergencies that we see throughout the country. Maybe not to the extent that they see them there. We don't get a hurricane here. We get the remnants of the hurricane, okay, which is a lot of times just water. All right, and as high as we are here, you know as well as I do how many times we deal with flooding here. Okay, you know, you need to be aware of the kinds of hazards that you're going to face in your areas. Okay, and then plan for those hazards. That's what we do with our own operational plans. Okay, we've done a hazard evaluation for our community. We know the kinds of things that we have the potential to face, and we base our plans based upon those. Okay, it's not to say that something other than what we recognize won't happen, but at least we recognize, when we take the ones that we recognize and work with those, we begin to find that we can handle those a little bit easier, a little bit better. We have the resources and the people in place at the time.
Kind of going back a little bit too, before what you were saying about pre-planning, I know that you and I sat in on several meetings regarding the Gilboa Dam. And everybody thinks, geez, the Gilboa Dam's way down in middle Schoharie County. How is that going to affect the town of Colonie? But from what we learned, it could very much impact the town of Colonie.
Yeah, you know, there's quite a bit of water behind those two dams up there. And what they told us that is if both of those dams would have failed, okay, it would have impacted the people along the Mohawk. Okay, you know, the rest of the town would have been unscathed, obviously, but we would have had an impact here within our own community. Other communities would have suffered more. City of Schenectady would have had a worse situation. But, you know, we would have been impacted in how far are we? 60, 70 miles from Gilboa Dam. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we need to recognize that, you know, it isn't just outside the community these things happen. Right? And even when it does happen outside the community, what is its impact on us going to be?
Yeah, I guess, again, some of the stuff that I picked up from that was, okay, there may be a flood that may come down and like you said, damage or could affect our properties along the river. But what about all those bridges that cross the river? And we already saw the bridge out in Amsterdam area that failed that time as a result of undermining from high waters on the Schoharie Creek. We would look, I know that they would look at all the bridges that would be affected all up and down not only the Schoharie Creek, but the Mohawk River and possibly the Hudson River.
Exactly. What they were concerned about there was the debris that would have come downstream and what effect it may have had on the infrastructure of the bridges. And before they were going to allow heavy traffic and people over those bridges, they were going to check them out. And in order to do that, they needed to close them down. So its impact on the Capital District would have been fairly extreme.
Well, again, I just think that people don't appreciate a lot of the pre-planning that goes into a lot of the stuff, and a lot of examining things and try and correct the problem before it becomes a problem. So there's a lot involved. And again, I think we just saw that with the bridge that collapsed out in the Midwest, where we have a bridge that's very similar here in that connects Albany County to Rensselaer County. And that was something that they've now looked at and hopefully done some preventative measures to prevent that type of failure.
Well, you know, we talked about what emergency management is. That's what it's all about. It's a matter of looking at the kinds of hazards that you face and then looking at that life cycle of emergency, before, during, and after, okay? What can we do before the emergency to lessen the effects or to prevent it from happening? What we do during the emergency, if it does happen, how we recover from it, okay? And then planning for all of those things. Those are the 4 cycles that we deal with. And we try and deal with all of the different agencies and bring them together so that they have their plans in place as well.
As we wrap this up today, any final tips for folks or preparedness things that you can pass along to them?
Be aware. Learn about the hazards in your community. Know what they are. Know how to protect yourself from them. Plan for them. Plan to take care of yourself for a certain period of time. If you're okay, check on your neighbors. Make sure they're okay. Okay, if you can help each other out, help one another out, it lessens the load for those people that are first responders. They're going to have their crises to take care of. That cat in the tree at that particular time doesn't become a crisis. It is for you, but it isn't for them. All right. So it's important that you be able to take care of yourself and plan for your needs and lessen the load on the first responders.
And I guess on that same note, if a large-scale incident does happen here and you do call with a problem, don't be surprised if somebody doesn't show up immediately, because there may be folks that are worse off than you that those folks need to help before you do.
Yeah, you know, as I said, it's a crisis for you at the time, okay, because there's water in your basement. That's a big deal, and rightfully so, okay. But there may be people out there with a lot worse than you have it. And the job of emergency services in that particular thing is to prioritize those needs, to take a look and see who has the highest need, who's in the most danger, take care of those people first, and then eventually get to everybody else. But if you can take care of yourself for that period of time, it's going to lessen the load.
Okay. Well, Mike, thanks very much for being here today. I think you've brought a tremendous amount of information forward. Hopefully folks will take a look at this and take a look around their house and make sure they have a couple of gallons of water and some food in the house, and they start to look at these things and take it seriously and be prepared. And you know, they say an ounce of prevention is
worth the cure.
Yeah, so.
In the long run, Pete, it's the best way to handle it. It's going to make everybody's life that much. Hopefully, we'll never be in that position, but if everybody cooperates, it makes it that much easier.
Again, thanks folks for tuning in today. If you have any further questions regarding emergency management or what you can do to be prepared in your home, please feel to get hold of Mike, and his phone number and email address will be on the end of the show here. So don't hesitate to drop him a line or give him a call, and he would be glad to give you the information that you need. And if there's anything that we can do from the fire service end, please again feel free to contact me.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.